Hey everybody, thank you for joining us once again and welcome to another one. Today I'm going to show you some vintage lenses like this one that are really easy to fix and are really easy to service. I'm going to show you how to fix these lenses. I'm going to take this lens apart and I'm also going to recommend some other lenses that are really easy to fix. So if you want to know how to take care of your vintage lenses, keep watching. So before you undertake any lens fixing escapade, there are certain tools that you absolutely cannot do without. These are vital. Don't go near a lens without these special tools, otherwise you run the risk of damaging your lens. The first one I'm going to show you is this one. This is a lens spanner, and this is a really useful piece of kit. You can see that it consists of two arms with a variable width, and you can also flip those around to point the other way. So you can see that on this end there's a straight screwdriver blade and on this end, if I take the little things off, there are points. So you will need a lens spanner if you're going to do any lens fixing beyond simple dusting and cleaning of the front and rear glasses. So what this lens spanner does, on most lenses, on almost all lenses, or many lenses, there's a little ring with a cutout, two cutouts. There's one cutout here and there's one cutout here. The lens spanner just goes onto those two slots and you turn, and that allows you to undo any ring from any lens with slots or points to allow you to undo it, to unscrew that ring which is actually holding the front glass in. There's a similar ring at the rear and we can see the two points there, and most lenses, most vintage lenses are the same. This Helios lens, Helios 44, you can see the ring with the script engraved on it. Well, on that ring are two little screw slots. There's actually one here and one here, but you may not be able to see them on camera. I don't know if you can, but they are there, and those little slots are what the lens spanner goes into, and you undo it just by turning and twisting. So undoing that ring will take out this front element for you. You can see I've been having a go at this one already because it's a little bit loose. And most vintage lenses are the same. This Jupiter 8 is the same, although you do have to undo the front faceplate from here first. That is something you will find in some lenses. And to do that, you will need one of these. This is a rubber lens spanner, and the idea is, let me show you on a different lens. The idea is that this is the Myer Optic lens. This is one with a faceplate on there that you screw off. So the idea is that it's a friction fit, and you just push the rubber spanner and undo the faceplate like that, and that will come off. Actually, on this lens, it's a kind of a ring thing, and underneath there you can see all the points to undo all the various elements in the lens with a lens spanner. You can see those cutouts. There's one there. So one thing I will say is don't go too far, because you can ruin a lens. Don't go too far in dismantling. I never go any further personally than the front and rear elements, unless the lens is a really simple one. Right, let's open up this lens now. I did open up this lens about 10 years ago. It was in a right mess when it came to me. And I fixed a cloudy doublet by boiling it in water as a last resort for about 15 minutes, and that actually did fix it, but I've not opened the lens since then, and it's got a bit dusty since then. So I'm going to open it up now. So firstly, undo the front ring, and we get our lens spanner in, and we keep turning it and turning it and turning it until we've turned it enough to get this ring out and unscrewed. Let's lay that aside. And the front element should just pop out, and indeed it does. Let's make very sure we know which way round this goes. It's got a flat side at the back, and the convex side is at the front. There is a little optical element. Isn't it tiny? Look how tiny it is. That's from 1936 out of this old lens. So we'll put that down on something nice and soft. Let's get the rear one out now. There is inside this lens a little part that needs to come out. There's a little collar down the back of the lens, and we'll now undo the innermost ring. Okay, so that is now undone, and if we turn the lens over, this little doublet falls out. This is a cemented doublet. That is two pieces of glass, two elements cemented together, and it's in between those that it was cloudy when I first got it. So I boiled this in water. I'm not suggesting you do that. It was a last resort for me, but it did work. So we now have our almost denuded lens barrel. We've got in there one remaining element. We can see that, and it is clean and clear. There's no fungus or other nasties been developing in there since I last had it apart. Let's check the other elements. Let's look at this tiny, teeny little front one first. Here we are now. This, I think, is also clean and clear. No problems on that one. No oil migration. No dust. Well, a little bit of dust, but no fungus. Nothing awful. So I'll take the microfiber cloth wherever I've put it. Where did I put it? Here. I'll take that, and I'll now just give that little element a quick polish. Dust is an enemy while we're doing this, but of course you can't completely get rid of dust. It just can't be done. Let's clean this little doublet now. This is the doublet that I cooked some time ago and seems to have survived its misadventures in the meantime. So we'll give that a clean. And I'm hoping that will come up nice and clear again, and that none of the problems that I got rid of last time have reappeared, because this did seem a little dirty, possibly even a little cloudy. I can't see any cloudiness in there. I can't see any separation of the doublets. When doublets separate, doublet is two pieces of glass glued together. When they separate, and they sometimes do in vintage lenses because older glues were used, and even if they were the most modern glues, I don't know how they'd be after 90 years. So these do separate sometimes, and when you see that happening, what that means is that the glue cementing them together is becoming unstuck, and they'll look cloudy when that happens. They'll look like, you know, they can't be looked through clearly. They won't be clear. There'll be all sorts of cloudiness and nastiness and stuff in the way of a clear light path. So there we are. I think we've got that nice and clean now. I don't think there's been any particular problems there. So we can now just put that lens back together. And as they say in all the best workshop manuals, reassembly is the reverse of removal. So let's do that now. All right, so here's our little Fed 10 lens, all nice and put back together and integral once more. You can see I fitted the light baffle in there, the little piece, a little cylindrical piece that came out. I'll show you actually, this little piece that came out of the back of the lens. We'll put that back in there. I've screwed all the elements down tight. The rear one is now down tight. The front one is now down tight. Don't tighten them up too much. No need to tighten them up too much. And our little collapsible is now restored or at least cleaned and ready for another 10 years service, I guess, or something of that sort. I've not touched the focusing helicoid on this lens, but they're very, very easy to fix on these. The helicoid is actually here. This is the focusing helicoid that the lens turns on. And see, we've got the, if I can undo the lock, you will see that that is where the lens actually turns, and you'll see the helicoid moving in and out as I turn the lens lever. So those are really easy to clean and service on here. I would suggest just a tiny little, almost imperceptible bit of grease on here, just to keep it good. Please don't put too much on, because you don't want grease going in either your mechanical camera or certainly your mirrorless camera. That would be something of a disaster. So if you're going to lubricate that, the tiniest little bit of grease you can imagine, and then just move the focusing helicoid back and forth, and you'll spread that grease around. Now, there is special camera grease, lens grease, that you're supposed to use. I'm going to put my hand up and say I've never actually used it. I should have done that, but instead I usually use motor grease, lithium-based motor grease. It's a little heavy, a little heavier than it should be, but like camera grease, importantly, it doesn't migrate, it doesn't melt. It has a very, very high melting point because it's for use in automotive applications, so it just doesn't melt. That means it doesn't move, it doesn't migrate, it doesn't get onto bits that you don't want it to get to, and it stays put where it is. And I've always found it a good alternative. You may or may not wish to use it, but that is something that I do. So that lens is all nice and fixed up, and the techniques that I've used here apply to any collapsible, the Feds, the Industars, and also the Leica lenses too, the German Leica lenses. The Elmar lenses are very, very simply constructed, pretty much exactly the same as this one, and they'll come apart in the same way. But you might say, I don't have a collapsible. How do I service other lenses? Well, I'll show you some other lenses that are easy to service. Here's one of them. This is the little Jupiter 8. This is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. These were made in the millions and millions. If you have one, they're really easy to service. You do have to screw off the plate, and you'll need to get one of these rubber lens spanners to do that with. But if you screw off that plate on these later ones, you'll see the ring underneath. Earlier ones, I can't recall now, either they're the same and you screw off the plate to reveal the ring, or the ring is just there. But there is a ring with two little screw heads that you put your lens spanner in and turn just the same. Same with the rear also. You may not be able to see it there because it's buried within the lens mount, but it is there. So the Jupiter 8 is another nice, easy one to service and fix up yourself, as is this lens. This is the Helios 44. These are very, very, very simple lenses to service and fix. Probably the easiest one I've ever done. Quite possibly the easiest lens in the world to service and fix. All it is one ring here. Remove it to remove the front element. Another ring at the back. It's the inner of these two rings, as I recall. Take that out to remove the rear element. And then there's a doubler inside, and as I recall, that drops out from the front when the front element is removed. That reveals the aperture blades, and you can see that I need to reveal aperture blades on this one because they're pretty wild and kooky at the moment. One of them's come off its pivot and is just floating free. So that's a lens that I can do this on, because you can completely strip it without any difficulty at all. And I'm going to try and get that aperture blade back on there. I've never done it before, but it can't be that difficult because they just sit on little posts. They swing, each blade swings from a little post. So I'm going to try and get that back on there. But another very, very simple, easy lens to service, a real piece of cake, is the Helios 44 and the 44-2, as is this little Industar 61. This is another favourite of mine. I love these little Industars. This was my first lens on my Fed 4L all those years ago. Really, really simple lens to fix and to service. There is a ring at the front, just undo it, comes off nice and easy. But the screw part, the screw slot is just here. You get a spanner on it and turn it. Front element comes out nice and easy, and the rear element also comes out nice and easy. Difficult to show you because it's right down the lens barrel. Interestingly, this lens does have a little light baffle, just a metal one inside there, similar to the Fed lens, the Fed 10 lens that I've just dismantled and cleaned. So it's interesting to see the Industars were the successors of the Fed lenses. It's interesting to see that some of the design principles from right back way in the 30s have managed to come into the, I think this one was made in the 70s, but it was made up to the 90s, this lens. So that's a really interesting thing to see that that part is still used all those years later. Now check out these 3 screws around the back of the lens here. Those are for, those rather secure this lens plate running around the outside here. Once you take this plate off, you'll see that there's a little channel for grease to run in, and the main reason why these lenses get sticky and heavy to move, as this one is, the focus ring is very, very heavy and sticky, and it moves in little bursts and jolts, and it's generally horrible. The main reason why they turn horrible like that is because of this plate at the rear, and if you take that off, you will find underneath here, you'll find a channel where grease sits. The grease dries up over time. Clean it out. Use lens grease if you have it or if you can, but honestly I've found a little bit of motor grease, just 1, 2, 3 dabs is enough, and that will really rejuvenate these lenses back to pretty much new feeling. You don't really need to do too much to them other than clean out any dust or other stuff that might be in there. So very, very simple lens to service. And then we have another one. This is the Myer Optic Oriston. This is also the Practicar 50mm, same lens, a Pentacon 50mm, it's also known as. This has a plate on the front that you need a rubber lens spanner to remove, but once you've done that, underneath you will see the rings as we've seen already, with the 2 screwdriver slots that you turn and undo with your lens spanner. Same at the rear, there's another ring in the rear there, and do that to take out the rear element. I've never dismantled this lens, so don't go too far. If I was dismantling it, I would only take out the front and the rear elements. I wouldn't go any further. It's an SLR lens, and as I understand it, these are put together in a relatively complex way, so definitely one not to go too far with, but front and rear elements, piece of cake, really, really easy. Now, all of the lenses that we've looked at today have been relatively cheap ones, but vintage lenses generally are pretty simply put together, and they're mostly not difficult to disassemble to some degree. Like this Pancolar, CZJ Pancolar, this lens, when it came to me, was absolutely chock full of fungus. I was lucky because it was only just behind the front element here, and the front element in this lens is really easy to take out. Again, it's the same principle that we've seen. There's a ring in there, right down in there in the throat of the lens, so just remove that and then your front element will drop out. You can clean it. Same for the rear element. There's a ring there that will drop out and you can clean the element. However, don't go any further unless you really know what you're doing with the CZJ lenses, because they are complex lenses if you go any further than the front and rear element. I've also already mentioned the 135mm lens that I ruined and destroyed. It would be it's a shame to ruin and destroy any of these vintage lenses because they're not making them anymore, and everyone that dies is another one less in the world. So don't go too far. Don't damage it for your own sake. You know, you don't want to mess up your lens, and you know, we don't want to reduce the number of these lenses that there are in circulation. That would be a shame. So CZJ lenses are complex aside from the front and the rear elements. Generally proceed with caution with any lens, especially an SLR lens. They tend to be a bit more complex that you're dismantling. If it looks tricky, listen to what your little voice is telling you and don't go any further, otherwise tears could result. If you don't go too far, you will find that you can create some really good results, like I did this with this Pancola. I thought it was a scrap lens and actually it was just a little bit of fungus behind the rear element. I washed it in vinegar, cleaned it off. That was about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, and I've had no problems since. It's absolutely clean and clear, as you can, I think, see there on the video. So that is a success. But yes, CZJs don't go too far. Generally, SLR lenses don't go too far because they can be quite complex. One thing I should mention is when you are cleaning individual glass elements, when you've got a lens apart, when you're using your microfiber cloth, like this one, to clean those elements, be sure that the cloth is clean and never rub too hard, because some glass from vintage lenses, like the Leica Scimitar for example, is very soft, and if you're not careful you will scratch it. Also, if you're not careful, the more modern vintage lenses, 60s, 70s, 80s, have coatings, so be careful that you don't rub too hard and scratch those coatings or wear them away to any degree at all, because they're vital for your lens's performance. So I just thought I'd mention that. That's an important thing to remember. So there we are, some nice easy lenses to fix, service and clean. Many vintage lenses are very easy to clean. Some are a bit more complex and require a little more concentration and care. If you don't go too far, if you're cautious in what you do, and if you do only what you know that you can do, you will have some real good success using these methods I've shown you today and the very simple basic tools that are needed. So I hope I've given you some confidence and some inspiration to attempt a cautious and careful lens clean. You don't need to just buy those lenses. You can also service them, fix them and keep them good. You don't need to just use them. You can also maintain them as well and preserve them for yourself and for anybody else who you might sell them on to, and for later generations as well. These lenses are getting very old now, and I think that we should take care of them. I think we have a duty to look after them because they're lovely old tech. Nobody's making any more of them, and we really do need to use them carefully, and they'll give us and anyone else many more years of service. So there we are. I guess that's about it from me for today. Thank you very much for watching this show. I really do appreciate it. If you've enjoyed it, chuck us a sub and consider coming back next time to see what we're doing next week. There's usually something interesting about vintage lenses, and occasionally we look at moderns as well. Thank you to subscribers. I do appreciate your support. Many thanks to you, and thank you to patrons also for your support. Without that support we couldn't make this show in the way that we do, so many thanks to you also. As for me, I think that's it for now. So until we meet again, happy photography, enjoy those vintage lenses, and if you're not doing anything too annoying, irritating or irksome next week as around this time, please do join me and drop in for another session of Zenography. Cheerio all.